This is Tim Hart's Bible commentary and his explanations of what he feels is correct, but it takes a lot to understand the Bible, and very few people can adequately explain the scriptures, even on a very superficial level. This is Matthew chapter 13, chapter 19, Matthew, verse 13. Then little children were brought to Jesus, that he might put his hands on them and pray. But the disciples rebuked those who brought them. One of the nicest things about living this life is that children do love you, and one example of that is I was in some shop or something like that, maybe McDonald's, I don't know. And this little 3 or 4 year old came up to me and started instantly talking to me. And the parents said, "Oh, are you a teacher?" Because she has a great affinity with teachers. And to me, that's just fantastic. There's no greater compliment than that. And with the institutional churchgoers and institutional pastors, they tend not to have that happen. They're too busy to do everything else and looking after the shop, as it were. But he said, "Leave the children alone and allow the little ones to come to me, and do not forbid or restrain or hinder them, for of such as these the kingdom is composed." What does that mean? I've noticed that some people have a very childlike faith towards the kingdom. They don't hold grudges. Very simple things that children do that some people also do. 15. And he put his hands upon them and then went his way. 16. And behold, there came a man up to him, saying, "Teacher, what excellent and perfectly and essentially good deed must I do to possess eternal life?" This sounds like a trap to me. "17. And he said to him, Why do you ask me about the perfectly and essentially good? Only one only there is who is good, perfectly and essentially, God. If you would enter into the life, you must continually keep the commandments." And this is, Jesus obviously didn't want to talk to this fellow because it was a trap, and I feel that Jesus wanted to put him off. 18. He said to him, "What sort of commandments, or which ones?" And Jesus answered, "You shall not kill. You shall not commit adultery." Now, I don't like to harp on the adultery question again, but notice how it says adultery only just a few verses before in the last discussion, and how important it is to not commit adultery. But it's equally important to not steal. Jesus says, "You shall not steal," and equally important, to not bear false witness. Jesus says, "You shall not bear false witness." Most people don't know what that means. Essentially, if you could imagine that Jesus was being set up for death, and yet here were people gossiping about Christ and the miracles that he had done, and saying it was of the devil and all sorts of things. That's being a false witness. And how hurt do you feel when your friends and your relatives stab you behind the back? Why does it hurt so much? That's being a false witness. It takes a great deal of time to learn the art of not being a false witness. We know that it's wrong and we don't steal, generally speaking, and but the false witness one is a really, you can hone it and get it down to a fine art so that you never go down that path, so that if you lived 2,000 years ago, you would not partake of being a false witness along with the religious leaders of the day. You would not partake with the Pharisee lovers of that day. And not only that, like imagine the very opposite. Instead of being a false witness, that you're a defender of Christ, and that you verbally assault people who speak out of turn. How nice would it be if somebody was stabbing you behind the back without your presence, without you being there, and a friend started attacking the person and said, "Don't you ever say that about my friend. He's true blue. He's exactly the good friend that you misunderstand him to be. I will fight you over this issue." How wonderful. Now can you understand what it means to be a false witness and to be the opposite of a false witness? And that's just the beginning. 19. Honour your father and your mother, and you shall love your neighbour as yourself. Again, these two scriptures are very difficult to totally overcome. Where do you stop? Like, there's a situation with your mother and the father, and things get heated under battle. People that don't have any problem with Christianity, especially church-going Christianity, but when it comes to loving their mother and father, statistically 95% of sons can't get along with their father. So we have two balls of court. We have the Christian lifestyle, and there's family, and never the twain shall meet. But here Christ is saying that spirituality is intrinsically linked with the relationship that you have with your father and your mother. You should love your neighbour as yourself. How difficult is this one to overcome? Loving your neighbour as yourself. I used to think that your neighbour was everyone, but I've come to the conclusion that your neighbour is the person that you come across in your daily walk, and your ability to love them is a direct reflection against your ability to love Christ himself. Does that mean we go to door and say, oh, listen, what can I do for you? No, every problem presents to itself. This very night, I heard a woman not able to start her scooter, and the starter motor kept going round and round, and I ended up driving her home. Okay, this is Matthew 19 out.